Hello, everybody. Vasu Vaddiparty here. This is the Make the Money and Run podcast, Friday football show, special Wednesday edition. I am your solo host today, Charlie O. On assignment. Intern Nick is actually in school. That's why he's an intern, so he's unable to join us as well today. I have baseball playoffs starting the next 2 days, so we will not have a Friday show this week for the Friday football show, which means we can preview every game, including the Thursday game for the NFL. Lots to talk about in college football as well, too. Big matchups this weekend, as well as a review of last weekend's NCAA routes. I mean, just let Georgia and Alabama play right now for the championship right in the middle of the year. I think that's probably where it's going to end up at anyway. But you got to think that Georgia and Alabama are the two best teams in college football right now. But there are some outliers that are going to make a case for themselves. Thanks to everybody on Facebook and YouTube Live. We appreciate it. Frank, Justin, both being on as well. We are here every Mondays, Thursdays, and Fridays normally. As I said, the special edition because of baseball. We will have our Friday football show right now, solo at Facebook and YouTube and Twitter Live. If you miss any of it, please pass it along to everybody. Download, subscribe. Anywhere you get your podcasts, Apple, Google, iHeart, Spotify, SoundCloud. Also, every day by 6 o'clock, we will have the latest news and updates, as well as our social media picks on Facebook and Instagram, Twitter as well, too, at MTMAR Sports, at Vparty Sports, Vparty Sports on Instagram. Email us at mtmarpodcast@gmail.com. What do you think about the NFL season so far? What do you think about the college football season so far? Very interesting through 4 weeks in the NFL. And the first 5 weeks have really told us that Georgia and Alabama are the two best, but everybody else is playing for third place, apparently, the way that both teams look. Alabama's offense versus Georgia's front seven, who all look NFL ready. And Auburn's a pretty good team, but Arkansas is a pretty good team, and they got smoked on Saturday morning here, West Coast time. They got smoked on Saturday morning. Auburn played well against LSU in the SEC. They came back with a victory as well, too. So rough weekend for some, great weekend for others. The NFL weekend depends on who your team is. Lots of mediocre play. I don't want to say mediocre play, but there's some good play out there and there's some outliers as well. They're at the top of the heap. The Arizona Cardinals are 4-0, the only undefeated team in the NFL right now. Lots of 3-1 teams, including the Cowboys, the Rams, the Green Bay Packers. The Cleveland Browns are 3-1 as well, too. So a lot to talk about. Did you hear about this guy named Tom Brady? He made his return after 20 years playing in New England. He took the Tampa Bay Buccaneers back to New England, got a victory, an ugly victory, 19-17 over New England. All that and more. The Buccaneers were favored by 7.5, not even close to covering the 7.5. We're sponsored by the Britannia Arms of Cupertino. 40 years they've been celebrating as Cupertino. It's Silicon Valley's longest-serving British pub and restaurant. 20 TVs for all your NFL and NCAA viewing pleasure. All the liquor, all the beer and liquor you want, all the British food and appetizers you want for a full day of football Saturdays and Sunday. Don't forget the baseball playoffs are on too. And during the week, if you have an event you want to be catered, they will come to you or they will set up for your group event right there in San Jose, in the border of San Jose and Cupertino. So if you're in Silicon Valley, hit them up, BritanniaArmsDeanza.com, 408-252-7262. All right, let's get to the NFL here from last week. Start off in the AFC here. The Los Angeles Chargers are very good. Another 3-1 team. I think they're the second best team in the AFC right now. I'm still not sold on Arizona. Somebody's going to have to convince me that Arizona is the best team in the NFL. Record-wise, they are the best team, but I'm still not sold on their defense, but they have sold out to put a veteran-laden team on there. J.J. Watt has been a big boost to them. A.J. Green is a great number 3 receiver. He's been living off his reputation the last couple of years in Cincinnati. But he's better than what Larry Fitzgerald was right now the last few years. And we're talking about a Hall of Famer. DeAndre Hopkins, the number 1 asset there on the outside, and then Christian Kirk as well is there for Arizona. They've got a decent running game. Of course, Kyler Murray, the first NFL quarterback to have 3 straight games of 75% completions and more. You've got to catch him in order to tackle him, and he's very fast. And once he decides to run, it's impossible to bring him down. Right now, Cliff Kingsbury, who, by the way, was the first one to get fired according to the odds this year. He's at 4-0, laughing at everybody at top of the heap of the entire NFL, certainly of the NFC West. The Rams 3-1, who they just beat up to a pulp last Sunday. The Rams coming off their victory 2 weeks ago against Tampa Bay, got beat up by Arizona and beat up bad. and they're going to have to go back to the drawing board. They're going to short week. They're going to play Seattle this week. The Chiefs came back against Philadelphia. They're 2-2 now in the AFC West. They're still behind Denver. They're still behind the Raiders, and they're still behind the Chargers. So last place for the Chiefs, a very unfamiliar position, but all four teams over 500. Philadelphia with the loss at home. They had a lead. Chiefs had to come back. Tyreek Hill had a huge game for the Chiefs. I know that because he's on my fantasy football roster. Denver loses at home to Baltimore. I thought this was an easy pick. I thought Baltimore's offense was too good coming off the week that they had before against Detroit. You know, John Harbaugh was going to get back in the mad scientist room, and their offensive coordinator, Greg Roman, was going to do the same, and they unleashed Lamar Jackson a little bit, and they were able to tear apart a little bit. 17-7 the score, so not really tear apart, but they were able to beat up a pretty good Denver defense. Denver 3-1 in the AFC West. The Pittsburgh Steelers, what's going on with them? They had an opening week victory against Buffalo, which just goes to show any given Sunday. On the road at Buffalo, they come back to beat the Bills, but then they've lost 3 straight. The offensive line is not very good. Ben Roethlisberger's starting for the Steelers. Not sure if he should start or not, but I blame him more on the offensive line. The last 3 games has been very tough to watch him trying to be blocked for. He's not as young as he was. That's a given. We're not. None of us are as young as we used to be, so that's part of the problem there. They're not getting any run support. The defense is giving up yards. Aaron Rodgers picked them apart, 27-17 Packers over the Steelers. Pittsburgh now 1-3. They are behind Cleveland, who ended up beating Minnesota on Sunday, a very low-scoring game. People thought that game was going to go over 50.5, nowhere near 11-7. The final score, Cleveland's defense, Myles Garrett, Jadeveon Clowney, they made life miserable for Kirk Cousins on Sunday as well, too. So Philadelphia, Denver win. Philadelphia loses, Denver loses. The Steelers lose. Cincinnati won last Thursday. They beat Jack. How about Urban Meyer? Holy cow. The Jacksonville Jaguars are 0-4. Urban Meyer is guaranteed all these contract stipulations. They got Trevor Lawrence. They're going to build a new facility. And it's one thing to go 0-4 and you're a rookie coach and you're not used to losing. I worry about his health problems. Clearly, at Ohio State, he never lost. At Florida, he never lost. At Utah, he never lost. But this has been tough. But the fact is that you don't leave your team hanging. And you left your team hanging. And for that, you should be reprimanded. And Shad Khan, the owner of the Jacksonville Jaguars, did reprimand him and said he had to earn his trust back. That's not a private behind closed door statement. That was a public statement that was made. That was a public statement that was made on Monday on Tuesday after Urban Meyer did not fly back with his team after their tough loss to Cincinnati Thursday night. They played better and they've got some things going. The problem is they don't have any assets. When Jimmy Johnson went 0-4 to start, he had Herschel Walker and he made the big trade to get all those draft picks. There is nobody on that team that are going to give them draft picks. And even if they thought of trading Trevor Lawrence for a lot of draft picks, he probably right now is not as good as a third round pick. So they're there, but Trevor Lawrence is a slam dunk pick. I mean, what has Urban Meyer done since he's joined the organization? It was a slam dunk to take Trevor Lawrence, but everything else that he's done has backfired. And now the scandal, the video at some dance club after not flying back with his team, that can't help. I don't have very much personal experience with Urban Meyer. I just know as somebody that has family ties to Ohio State, I just do not like the man. And he's all right. Maybe off the football field, he's all right. But some of the things he does and then some of the excuses he comes up with. And now this has to top the cake. What do you think at mtmerpodcast@gmail.com, on Facebook, at Twitter, at YouTube? I mean, to leave your team or to not fly back with your team, show up the next day, and then be caught on video, grainy video as it is. Actually, grainy video makes it worse than it is because that seems more salacious than anything else. So Urban Meyer had to apologize. Shad Khan had to come out and reprimand him in public. That's not a good look for the Jacksonville Jaguars. See what happens the rest of the year, but he may not last past 1 year if he even makes it to the end of the year. And we all know about his health issues that forced him out of Florida and, again, forced him out of Ohio State because of the situation that was going on with the Buckeyes. And they had Ryan Day in waiting as the head coach, and then Jacksonville came a-calling. Shad Khan came a-calling and wanted him, and he might be regretting that decision. Let's check out Facebook now, see what's going on. Salacious. Oh, thanks, Frank. Good word, salacious. You know, it's that San Jose State education, Frank. Appreciate you watching on Facebook. Appreciate everybody watching on YouTube and Twitter as well. But it's really tough for Jacksonville right now. The fans hang in there. They've got a good nucleus. Their defense is okay. They actually gave Cincinnati a tough time and thought they had a chance to win it at one point. All right, continuing on with the AFC. Those Buffalo Bills, I'm going to call it right now through week 4. Way to go out on a limb, Vasu. Week 4. Way to call it out. 13 more weeks left to go. The Buffalo Bills are 3-1. Nobody, and I love Justin Herbert, and we'll talk about Justin Herbert in a second. I love Justin Herbert, but nobody is playing better quarterback in the AFC, and even better than Kyler Murray, who has a 4-0 team. Nobody is playing better quarterback than Josh Allen right now. Yeah, they had the Houston Texans. 18.5-point spread. Who thought that Houston was going to cover 18.5? Let me know. I want names. I want to know who's there. Plus 18.5 on Houston. I'm sure there was money on it. It's tough to lay 18.5. If I had known, I would have taken all the other games I had, which I had a good weekend. I'll get to my weekend in a little bit when we get to the lines. But Buffalo throttles Houston 40-0. Buffalo defense, by the way, my fantasy football defense. So I raked. By the way, I won by 40 points in my league. I didn't even need Darren Waller on Monday night, and he didn't do very much. He had a pretty good game, but they lost to the Chargers, so he didn't have any points. Fortunately, I did not need him. The Buffalo Bills right now, the best AFC team in the land, maybe even the best NFL team in the land. I would love to see them play Arizona. You know what happened on the Hail Murray last year at the end of the game. That's how the Cardinals beat them last year. So you can't say that Arizona beat them handily and they would be able to handle them again. Not so fast, as Lee Corso would say. By the way, the Buffalo Bills, and we'll get to all the matchups this week, they are going to Kansas City this weekend for Sunday Night Football. So if you want to show up after the last 2 times that Kansas City has handled them in the divisional playoff and in the AFC Championship a couple of years ago, AFC Championship. No, not the AFC Championship. Last year in the division series and a couple times in the regular season that they've handled them when Buffalo's been playing well. This is a big matchup, and don't you think that Sean McDermott, Josh Allen, the rest of the Buffalo Bills defense, Tre'Davious White on defense, are getting ready for the Kansas City Chiefs. And this is a struggling Kansas City Chiefs. Don't have the lineup yet for that, but I got to think that Kansas City is still a 4.5 or 5-point favorite. We'll get to the lines in a second. Didn't have a chance to post them, but we will post them all during the week, and we'll have our selections every day by 6 o'clock Eastern, 3 o'clock on the West Coast during the week, and then 11 o'clock a.m. on Saturdays, and then noon Eastern on Sundays. 3 times on Saturday we post, 11 o'clock, 3 o'clock, and 6:30 on the East Coast. That's 8 o'clock, 12 o'clock, and 3:30 here on the West Coast, and then noon Eastern, and then at 3:30 Eastern, that's 9 o'clock and 12:30 on the West Coast for the football action that goes on. Plus, we've got a lot of MLB playoff action as well, too. Don't forget, keep up with the Make the Money and Run podcast. We've got NBA and NHL starting. NHL starting next week, the NBA starting on the 19th. We're sponsored by the Britannia Arms of Cupertino, celebrating 40 years of the best British pub and restaurant food and drink. BritanniaArmsDeanza.com, 408-252-7262. All right, let's go to the NFC now. The NFC, the Arizona Cardinals, we talked about them, 4-0. They beat up on LA. I thought LA had a chance to be the best team. They sure looked good in their 3 games. They tore up Tampa Bay 2 Sundays ago. Matthew Stafford looked like the best quarterback in the NFL. Sorry, Josh Allen fans, but Matthew Stafford looks like the best quarterback in the NFL, though. I love Josh Allen. I love Justin Herbert, too. And so it's going to be a good year for quarterback, especially with the way the NFL. Seattle was down 7-0 to the 49ers. The 49ers could have had a bigger lead, 10-0, maybe even 17-0, kind of let Seattle back in. They've always had a tough time with the Seahawks in Santa Clara ever since the new stadium was built. The Seattle Seahawks, Richard Sherman, eating turkey on the 50-yard line on that Thanksgiving night. So it's going to be interesting to see how San Francisco recovers. Jimmy Garoppolo, not yet named starter for this weekend. He hurt himself, so Trey Lance came in to start the second half for the 49ers. They were able to get a touchdown late to make it close, but Seattle dominated. Russell Wilson, my fantasy football quarterback, he had a big game in the second half. He had Metcalf. He had Lockett. He had Chris Carson behind him. 3 touchdowns for Russell Wilson. He takes big hits, but he never takes them solidly. The one hit he took right to the suplex last week really looked like it could have damaged him, but he always gets up. He gets sacked about 40 times a year. Part of that is he holds the ball too long. But Seattle will host the Rams this weekend, actually tomorrow night on a short week in Seattle. The Rams will go in bruised up from the Cardinals. Seattle off their win over San Francisco. Huge matchup because all of a sudden Seattle can go tick, tick, tick from last place at 1-3 or last place at 1-2 to now 2-2 ahead of the 49ers by virtue of the tiebreaker, and they beat the Rams tomorrow night, then they'll be 3-2 along with the Rams, and all of a sudden they'll take up one more, and they'll be one game back of the Arizona Cardinals going into Sunday's action with Arizona this weekend. We'll give you all the matchups in a little bit, but that's the NFC West. By the way, San Francisco will visit Arizona this weekend as well, too. So the NFC West continues to play each other and beat up on each other 2 straight weeks in a row. The Chicago Bears, Justin Fields started. Not sure who's going to start this weekend, according to Matt Nagy. Andy Dalton is still the starter, according to Matt Nagy, if he's healthy. But Justin Fields, it is the Detroit Lions, and they did not play great. Now David Montgomery, their star running back, is going to be out for 4 to 5 weeks. This is bad for the Bears. The division's not very good. Green Bay, clearly the best team in that division. Detroit, clearly the worst team in that division, maybe in the NFL. Of course, they had a chance to win against Baltimore last week, but who kicks a 66-yard field goal? I'll tell you who. Justin Tucker kicks a 66-yard field goal. I'm thinking Dodgers tonight. Justin Turner, hopefully he hits a 66-yard field goal with the bases loaded, and that will go a long way for the Dodgers tonight against the Cardinals. Justin Tucker hit the 66-yard field goal last week. But Green Bay, Aaron Rodgers, after that early season hammering by New Orleans, they went after Pittsburgh, a very struggling Pittsburgh team. 27-17, they covered 6 in that game. Minnesota Vikings, they lost to Cleveland 11-7. Offensively, they were going good for 2 weeks in a row. They almost beat Arizona, and then they come back and beat Seattle at home last week. But then they lose at home to the Cleveland Browns 11-7. It was a feast for Myles Garrett and Jadeveon Clowney. Minnesota did not have Dalvin Cook, or if they did, I didn't see the box score. I don't think he played at all, but Dalvin Cook was out. That left Kirk Cousins very one-dimensional, and that is not good for the Minnesota Vikings. Their defense is not very good. Although they did play well, they held Cleveland to 11 points. They did cover. It ended up in a pick-em for Cleveland and Minnesota. The New York Giants. Who thought the New York Giants were going to beat the New Orleans Saints this weekend? I did. I thought they were going to cover for sure. A 7-point underdog. It's very tough. They've got talent on that team. Saquon Barkley is still there, and he got the game-winning touchdown in overtime. They came back from 21-10 down in the fourth quarter. The Saints, to me, they still have Jameis Winston at quarterback. He's been okay. He's been better than okay, and he's also been awful. Check out the Carolina game. So now New Orleans 2-2 in that NFC South. The New York Giants are 1-3 now after the overtime win, 27-21. Barkley scores the game-winning touchdown in the OT. The Dallas Cowboys, are they the best team in the NFC East? Probably. They're 3-1. They hammer the Carolina Panthers, who are now 3-1. They still lead the NFC South by virtue of the fact that they haven't played Tampa Bay yet. So they're tied with Tampa at 3-1 in the NFC South. We'll get to Tampa in a second because apparently there was a big game in Tampa and a big return of a former player. Don't know if you heard that in the news at all. The Washington football team beats Atlanta. Atlanta 1-3 after their win over the Giants 2 weeks ago. The Washington football team now has 2 wins this year. They are set to go. That East Division still up for grabs. If they can figure out how to beat Dallas, if anybody can figure out how to beat Dallas this year, that might be the way to go. But Dallas' secondary is still in question. Carolina came back in the second half, made it a close game. But Trayvon Diggs, are you kidding? For the Dallas Cowboys, 4 straight games with interceptions, 2 last week. The second one he made was unbelievable. And their defense, if that secondary is anything like Diggs is, they're going to be headed for good times this year going into the rest of the season. 3-1 for the Dallas Cowboys. They lead the NFC East. The Philadelphia Eagles, we know they lost to the Cleveland Browns. They lost to the Kansas City Chiefs. They had the lead at one point. Jalen Hurts looks good, but Kansas City was just too much for them at the end, and the defense held up. Philadelphia ends up losing a high-scoring game to the Kansas City Chiefs. Good to see Andy Reid back on the sideline. He had to go to the hospital the week before after losing to the Chargers for dehydration. It was a tough week. Oh, this news just coming across. Justin Fields is going to be named the Bears starting quarterback. The 2021 first-round pick replaces a healthy Andy Dalton after helping the Bears to the Week 4 win. Well, there you go. Justin Fields, hopefully he's got the security now and he's able to do things well for them. They'll be able to go forward with this, and maybe it won't be a lost season with them at all. The David Montgomery injury will hurt. The Panthers have just traded for Stephon Gilmore, the player of the year, defensive player of the year, MVP candidate a few years for the Patriots, was released. He was on the PUP list, but the Panthers, needing some help in the secondary, acquired the all-pro cornerback for a 6th-round pick after the Patriots planned to release him. Very interesting news. Carolina going after some more defense. Matt Rule, known for his defensive ability, able to go after an all-pro cornerback. Let's see what Stephon Gilmore has. Right now, their secondary playing very well in Carolina, but it's no harm in having somebody be able to come in and spell them every once in a while. So those are the big news items coming out. We talked about the Washington football team beating Atlanta. Tampa Bay, Tom Brady returned to New England. They were 7.5-point favorite. The total was kind of high. The game ended up 19-17. The Patriots had a chance to win it. Nick Folk hit the crossbar on a 56-yard game-winning field goal attempt. Those aren't easily made, and Brady and the Buccaneers snuck out with a victory, 7.5-point favorites, totally covered by the Patriots. We'll just say that Bill Belichick knows how to game plan against his former players, because I heard Chris Collinsworth say, and I heard it mentioned other places. I have not seen the tape of it yet, but I will get a chance to maybe on the airplane tomorrow because I'm interested. They did not run two of the same defensive sets in a row against Brady. There were so many changes going in and out between Bill Belichick, his son Steve Belichick, helping on the defensive calls. They were not running the same defensive set 2 plays in a row, and it confused Brady, and you could see that it confused Brady. Early in the game, a lot of adrenaline. He was missing his throws. He was having a tough time with his throws. So it'll be interesting to see how they get ready to go for this weekend. But right now the Tampa Bay Buccaneers are 3-1. Tom Brady gets the New England game out of the way. Very long post-game interview, 15 minutes with Michelle Tafoya at NBC Sports. That was unheard of to have that kind of an interview, but apparently he had a lot of things to say, and he wanted to talk about it as well too. All right, when we come back in 30 seconds, the Make the Money and Run podcast, sponsored by the Britannia Arms of Cupertino, celebrating 40 years of the best British pub and food you have in Silicon Valley. 408-252-7262. BritanniaArmsDeanza.com is where you can catch your NFL, NCAA action. Lots of NCAA action to talk about. We'll get to the point spreads in a little bit for both college and the NFL, but we want to review what happened last week in college, as well as the upcoming previews for this weekend. Some big games in top 25 football, some big games in conference football now that we're in the middle of conference play. All right, all the NCAA action to talk about. Vasu Vaddiparty here, your solo host for the Make the Money and Run podcast, the Friday football show, special Wednesday edition, right here on YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter. If you miss any of the live broadcasts, please feel free to pass it on to everybody. Make the Money and Run. You can download it and subscribe anywhere you get your podcasts on Apple, Google, iHeart, and Spotify. All right, back in 30 seconds for the full NCAA wrap-up and preview. Welcome back to the Make the Money and Run podcast, sponsored by Britannia Arms of Cupertino, celebrating 40 years as Silicon Valley's #1 British pub and restaurant. BritanniaArmsDeanza.com, 408-252-7262. We're here usually every Mondays, Thursdays, and Fridays. We're here Wednesday for the special Friday football show, Wednesday edition. Vasu Vaddiparty, your solo host here. Britannia Arms, our sponsor. Check us out every Mondays, Thursdays, and Fridays live on Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube. If you miss any of the live broadcasts, please feel free to download, subscribe anywhere you get your podcast. Check out our social media pages, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. You can email us at mtmarpodcast@gmail.com. Send us notes. Who are your teams? What do you like going on so far with the NFL and the NCAA? We're about a quarter of the way in to both. College football a little bit ahead of the NFL right now in terms of time. So we'll see how the rest of the season goes right now. But some big matchups last week in the NFL and the NCAA, and some good ones upcoming this week. We'll get to the point spreads and the lines a little bit. But let us know what you think. Give us any criticism. We also have a Facebook page for the Make the Money and Run podcast. We have Facebook group pages where you can get to MTMAR, Make the Money and Run Facebook group page as well, too. Please feel free to subscribe and join anywhere that you see Make the Money and Run. We appreciate it as well. Next week for football, we're going to introduce a new sponsor. It's called My Super Draft, mysuperdraft.io. You can check it out right now, mysuperdraft.io/vpartysports.com. You can check that out if you love daily fantasy sports. This is a great way to get into it. It's not DraftKings. It's not FanDuel. it's a chance to actually make some money here, and it's a chance to actually get in on some good opportunities in the ground floor of what's going to be a great DFS daily fantasy sports site, as well as setting up your own leagues and setting up your own contests. A little bit different, a lot different than what the other ones the competition has out there as well too. So we'll have all that as well. I'll get all the sponsorships all set up. We'll get all the T's crossed and the I's dotted, and we'll get set to go. All right, college football now. We just did the NFL, the Big Ten. How about Iowa? Iowa, number 5 in the country. They come off a huge win over Maryland. They dropped 51 on the road at Maryland. Now, Maryland's not very good. And the Big Ten, the top half is really good, but the bottom half, not so good. But still, Iowa, after wins at Iowa State against Wisconsin, they are cruising along. They've got also with Michigan as well, too. Iowa is hosting Penn State. Number 4, Iowa hosting number 3, Iowa hosting number 4, Penn State in Iowa City. 1 o'clock on Fox, 4 o'clock Eastern, 1 o'clock on Fox. The big game of the day, and I mean the big game of the day, number 3 versus number 4. In the Big Ten, Michigan will go to Nebraska, coming off a huge hammering of Notre Dame last weekend. Michigan just came out and played well. Notre Dame had a tough time blocking, and 38-17, Michigan came up with the victory over Notre Dame. Penn State, Iowa, we talked about. Maryland will go to Ohio State. Ohio State, a big win over Rutgers as well. In the ACC last week, Clemson barely got a win over Boston College. North Carolina continues to roll. They beat up on Duke. And then Syracuse, Florida State, who cares? Pittsburgh dropped 52 on Georgia Tech. A lot of people thought Georgia Tech might win that game as a +5 underdog at home, and North Carolina State beat Louisiana Tech. Coming up this week in the ACC, 2 good games. Notre Dame will be at Virginia Tech. Wake Forest, who is number 19 now in the country, they are going to Syracuse. Virginia, Louisville, Georgia Tech at Duke. In the Big Ten, I want to go back to the Big Ten because we didn't give you the other games that are there. Penn State, Iowa, the huge game. Michigan, Nebraska. Michigan State will go to Rutgers this weekend. Michigan State playing very well. They've crawled up to number 11 in the top 25 rankings, and then Ohio State. So 1, 2, 3, 4 of the 5 games will have ranked teams in there. Ohio State will be on Fox noon Eastern as well. They've got Maryland coming into town as well. So, and then moving on to the Big 12 now. The Big 12, we got some interesting games coming up in the Big 12. Still no defense in the Big 12, but some interesting games from last weekend. Texas beat TCU, barely covered the 3.5, 4 points, 32-27 over TCU. Oklahoma had a game from Kansas State. Kansas State scored a touchdown late that enabled the Jayhawks to cover. The Wildcats to cover 37-31. Oklahoma over Kansas State. West Virginia upset at home by Texas Tech. Excuse me for a second. Solo hosting duties here. West Virginia gets upset by Texas Tech. Oklahoma State ends up beating Baylor 24-14. Late touchdown by Oklahoma State allows for the cover. They were a 4-point favorite. And Iowa State beats up on Kansas. Kansas, not a very good football team. Coming up this week in the Big Ten, we already talked about in the Big 12, Oklahoma, Texas, the Red River Shootout. How about that? The Red River Shootout coming up. It'll be a very interesting situation for – let me see what we got here. Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, there we go. The Red River Shootout, Texas versus Oklahoma, coming up in the Big 12. West Virginia will go to Baylor. Baylor, slight favorite there, and then TCU will go to Texas Tech. Some of the other NCAA matchups, Iowa hosts Penn State. We talked about that already. Red River, Texas, Oklahoma. Michigan visits Nebraska. Ole Miss versus Arkansas in the SEC. Alabama, who came off their big win over Lane Kiffin and Ole Miss. By the way, let me get a word in on Lane Kiffin. And I posted this, and Lane Kiffin is very egotistical, narcissistic. I saw him out here at USC, saw him out here with the Raiders. He thinks his stuff doesn't stink. And he totally disrespected Jamie Erdahl, a fine reporter for CBS, on the sideline. You're contracted by the network. You're contracted by the university. That's how you make your salary. And to not even answer the question or let her even finish the question, which you're supposed to do to begin with. Maybe you don't want a second question, that's fine, but you answer one question. To drop the headset mic right there before she even finished the question and quote unquote get your popcorn out. Well, anybody that got their popcorn out, it tasted very bad to watch that showing. by Ole Miss because they got hammered 28-0 to start Alabama. You don't think Nick Saban has a little angst towards Lane Kiffin and the way he was treated by Lane Kiffin when Lane Kiffin was there, saying that he had a lot to do with that offense, et cetera, et cetera. Nick Saban right now, whether you like him or hate him, is the god of college coaches. And so for him to come out and have that attitude on the road at Alabama to Jamie Erdahl and CBS, I'm really surprised that CBS did not go after him. But CBS was very classy. Brad Nessler, Gary Daniels, said Jamie Erdahl on the sidelines, as well as the crew that does a great job for the SEC on CBS every Saturday. They're going to have a doubleheader this weekend, by the way, too. It's going to be an interesting showdown this weekend. But that's what's going on. The Big 12, TCU, Texas Tech, West Virginia, Baylor, Oklahoma, Texas. Last week, Texas beat TCU. Oklahoma over Kansas State. Texas Tech beat Virginia. ISU rolls over Kansas. Last week in the Pac-12. Very interesting week. The Stanford Cardinal, who looked very bad against UCLA 2 weeks earlier, could not stop the run, could not stop the pass. UCLA came in and rolled on them. 4-point favorite. UCLA covered. Looked pretty good for them going into at home against Arizona State. Only a 3-point favorite. We'll get to them in a second. But the major upset, Oregon coming off 3 straight weeks of wins, including an upset over then number 3 Ohio State as a 15-point underdog. Stanford upsets Oregon 31-24 in overtime. Terrible job by Oregon. They did not play very well. Stanford gets a lot of credit. David Shaw gets a lot of credit. Stanford came out, played well. They got the game-tying touchdown late in the game. You still thought you had a chance to cover 8.5 if you were Oregon. But then when Stanford started moving the ball down, no chance, and then they ended up tying, coming back in overtime to win. That's going to be a tough loss for Oregon. That's going to be a tough loss for them to even think about getting in the college football playoff, because one loss in a Pac-12 conference that's not very well regarded when it comes to the voters is going to be tough. So right now that could have definitely upset any chances they had as a title contender. A lot of people say the Ohio State win will keep them in the conversation. Yeah, they'll be in the conversation, but then you can't lose to Stanford. The Ohio State game was going to be the tough one. So Stanford with the major upset over Oregon. UCLA, we just talked about them beating Stanford 2 weeks ago. They had a lead. They had a 6-point lead. They were covering. Halftime, Arizona State runs off 10 in a row. They have a 4-point lead at half, and they go on to win 42-23 at UCLA. UCLA could not stop the Wildcats offense. Arizona State, Herm Edwards has got it going on right now, and it's going to be interesting to see how they handle, because they're going to play Stanford this week. They're going to host Stanford on Friday night. Stanford's going into Arizona State, 10:30 Eastern on ESPN. Arizona State already installed as a 13-point favorite. Washington State will host Oregon State. Utah having a tough year. They're going to be on Fox. They're the triple header game on Fox at USC. USC in a world of trouble. They did beat Colorado last week, but Colorado's Colorado. And then UCLA will go to Arizona. They're a big favorite at Arizona on Saturday night, 16-point favorite as well. All right, Vasu Vaddiparty here with the Make the Money and Run podcast, sponsored by the Britannia Arms of Cupertino. Check them out at Britannia Arms, Dianza.com, celebrating 40 years of Silicon Valley's best British pub and restaurant. All the wine, liquor, beer you can handle, best British food in the nation, in the county, in the state. They've been the longest here as far as British food and restaurant, food and liquor, British restaurant and pub as well. You can check them out, 408-252-7262 as well. All right, we go to the SEC. What about the SEC last week? I mean, should we just let Alabama and Georgia play? Alabama and Georgia are going to end up number 1 and 2 if they're not already number 1 and 2. And there's a big gap between 2 and 3. I love Iowa, but I just don't think Iowa can keep up with Georgia. They have 7 front linemen, defensive line linebackers that are NFL ready right now. And they are chomping at the bit to go after Bryce Young and Alabama and that offense. Alabama's offense has had their moments of not great play, but overall they're probably still the best team. Georgia looking for a chance to match up not only in the SEC, but probably in the national championship. They rolled last week. Georgia rolled 37-0 over Arkansas. Arkansas just coming off a victory over Texas A&M 2 weeks ago. But Georgia, the number 2 team in the country, number 8 was Arkansas at the time. But 37-0. Sam Pittman had no answers for his former mentor, Kirby Smart, as Georgia rolls it up 37-0. Texas A&M lost to Mississippi State at home, 26-22. They were ranked 15 in the country. The Kentucky Wildcats are undefeated and still in the SEC undefeated. They upset Florida. Florida, an 8-point favorite going into that game. Kentucky with that great defense, and they are very good defensively. They shut down that Florida offense. Florida coming off a near upset over Alabama 2 Saturdays earlier. They lose to Kentucky 20-13. Florida 7.5-point favorite, 20-13 the final score for Kentucky. And then we talked about Alabama 42-21. Missouri was a 3-point favorite over Tennessee. And what does Tennessee do? They run up 28 straight to open the first quarter. They drop 62 in Columbia, Missouri, 62-24. Tennessee over Missouri. This week's games, Arkansas and Ole Miss, a good game right now. Arkansas trying to recover from last week. They'll be on ESPN this weekend. Ole Miss 17th in the country, 5.5-point favorite there. Vanderbilt, Florida, Tennessee, South Carolina, Georgia, Auburn. Very interesting game there. Georgia with that defensive front. Auburn had a tough game with LSU. They came back and won over LSU. I don't know if Georgia will have much need for Auburn right here. I just have a feeling that Auburn's going to be a ragdoll this weekend. 15.5 might not be that much. Might not be enough for Georgia in terms of covering that spread. LSU came off that loss with Auburn. Will play Kentucky this weekend as well, too. And then, of course, the second game, both the Georgia-Auburn game, the Alabama-Texas A&M game are both going to be on CBS, doubleheader. Alabama, Texas A&M coming off the loss we just said to Mississippi State. They're going to have the doubleheader game. They're going to go to Texas A&M for an 8 o'clock Eastern, 5 o'clock kickoff on CBS. So very interesting setup in the SEC. Kentucky playing well, but right now, Georgia and Alabama, the two best teams going. And then one American score that I wanted to bring up was that Cincinnati Bearcats are very good. Cincinnati ranked number 4 in the country. They took on Notre Dame. It was a 7-5 matchup going into last weekend. Cincinnati had exposed Notre Dame's offensive line blocking problems. Michigan beat Wisconsin last Saturday. That was what I was thinking of, because I was thinking of Jack Cohn and the Notre Dame quarterback. He got hurt in that game. Jack Cohn transferred from Wisconsin to Notre Dame. So Michigan beat Wisconsin 38-17, and Cincinnati rolled over Notre Dame 24-13. Cincinnati Bearcats, very good in that American Conference. They can play with the best of them. I don't know about Alabama and Georgia, but then again, the other 23 teams, I don't know if any of them can play with Alabama and Georgia right now. Thanks to Susan on Facebook. Appreciate it. Thanks to Frank as well on Facebook as well, too. But that's the college football wrap for the weekend. Lots of big games. Let me just run through the top 25 here for the weekend. We'll get to the lines in a second. Temple will go to Cincinnati on Friday. Stanford, Arizona State Friday night. Oklahoma, Texas, the Red River Shootout. Ohio State will host Maryland. That might not be easy for Maryland at all. Michigan State, Rutgers. Michigan State, number 11. Arkansas will miss a good game Saturday morning, at least West Coast time, morning-wise. Florida will host Vanderbilt. They need a Vanderbilt after what happened in Kentucky last weekend. Sorry, Vanderbilt. You're just not very good. I apologize. But Florida may 38.5-point spread. Yikes for Vanderbilt, who nearly lost to Massachusetts last week, by the way. So Vanderbilt maybe having a tough time. Georgia, Auburn, we talked about. Boise State, BYU. That's a big game in the Mountain West. Boise State coming off a loss last week to Nevada, Reno. BYU playing a little bit better. They're 5-0 still. They're ranked number 10 in the country. They have been playing very well. They were an underdog to open the year at Utah, and they ended up beating Utah outright. Wake Forest has played really well. They're 5-0 in the ACC. Not a great year for the ACC, not a great year for Clemson. Wake Forest 5-0. They're going to Syracuse. That should be a win for them. SMU will go to Navy next week. Penn State, Iowa. We talked about Michigan, Nebraska. We talked about Notre Dame, Virginia Tech, LSU, Kentucky, Alabama, Texas A&M. San Diego State, 4-0. They're going to host New Mexico. That game will be late, 9 o'clock Eastern on Fox Sports 1, 19.5 according to what I have here on the point spread for San Diego State. So lots of action in college football this weekend. We're here every Mondays, Thursdays, and Fridays. This is a special Wednesday edition of the Make the Money and Run Friday football show. I've got baseball coverage tomorrow and Friday for the division series, so we will not be here tomorrow and Friday. Charlie O is on vacation, on assignment on vacation to make his wife happy. So I'm assuming that's the assignment, is to keep your wife happy in Alaska as well, too. So that's where they're going. Intern Nick has a class today. That's the internship. So he is unavailable as well, too. All right, when we come back, the Make the Money and Run podcast, sponsored by the Britannia Arms of Cupertino, we will have the lines for the NFL. We'll have some of the college football lines as well, too, as I'll run through them. We don't have a posting for them, but we will have the social media posts. You can check our social media posts out every day by 6 o'clock Eastern on our social media pages, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, mtmarpodcast@gmail.com. at MTMAR Podcast, at Vparty Sports, Vparty Sports on Instagram as well, too. What do you think about your teams? Let us know. Email us. Check out our Facebook group pages as well, too. We have a Make the Money and Run Facebook group page as well as a separate Facebook page as well, too. So you can leave comments as well there, too. I'm interested to know who people like this year, who their favorite teams are. What do they see? Or is it just going to be one of those years, kind of like last year or even before the pandemic, where nothing just goes right for your teams? Okay. We'll see how that goes. But anyway, that's the college football wrap up for right now. We'll come back with all the point spreads and all the lines for the key games this weekend for the Friday football show. Vasu Vaddiparty, your solo host here. We'll be back in 30 seconds. Welcome back to the Make the Money and Run podcast, the Friday football show. If you missed the MLB playoff preview show, preceded this show. You can download, subscribe as you can for every show, anywhere you get your podcasts, Apple, iHeart, Google, Spotify, SoundCloud as well too. Usually Mondays, Thursdays, and Fridays, we're here live on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter. But today being Wednesday, and I've got baseball the next couple of days, this is a special edition of the Friday football show. Check out our social media posts every day by 6 Eastern during the week, 11 o'clock a.m. Eastern on Saturdays, noon Eastern on Sundays. 3 posts on Saturdays to cover all the action, morning, noon, and night. One morning for me. And then same on Sunday for NFL kickoffs, baseball playoffs taking place as well, too. Check out the Britannia Arms of Cupertino at BritanniaArmsDianza.com. 40 years of the best food and drink, serving British pub and restaurant, celebrating 40 years of Silicon Valley's longest serving restaurant, Britannia Arms of Cupertino. They'll do corporate events, and they'll set up your group events as well, too, during the week. They've got 20 TVs in there, so next time you're in Silicon Valley, head over to San Jose Cupertino border. Go check it out. You'll see Mike and Tony there having a good old time catering to their loyal customers that they have during the week as well as on the weekends, too. But 20 TVs, plenty of TVs to keep up on your NFL games, your fandom, your fantasy football, your point spreads, everything that has to do with football. You can catch it on Saturdays and Sundays at the Britannia Arms of Cupertino. All right, we went through the matchups itself. Let me give you the lines here as we get to the games for tomorrow. I'm going to go to the other screen here. Unfortunately, we don't have them printed up. I'm just going to go in order. Tomorrow night, the Rams are going to go to the Seahawks, the big division game for Seattle. If they win, they'll vault up to second place. They'll have won 2 in a row. Their first one was Indianapolis, then they lost 2 in a row. They have a chance to win 2 in a row now. The Rams are 2.5-point favorites on the road, 54.5. Seattle at home getting 2.5. And traditionally, Russell Wilson has had a good time against the Rams. But this is a different Rams defense. This is a different Rams day. So Seattle plus 2.5 at home, 54.5. The New York Jets coming off their win over Tennessee. They're a 3-point underdog to the Atlanta Falcons. Atlanta lost to Washington late. Falcons have 1 win to their name. No trade rumors. Matty Ryan says that he does not want to be traded. Those rumors were false about a possible trade. He's still there. He's still the quarterback. He's still better than Zach Wilson right now, though I love Zach Wilson. -3 for the Atlanta Falcons, 46. By the way, we'll post these on our social media posts later by 6 o'clock Eastern. And definitely on Saturdays and Sundays, we'll have our football picks as well, too, as well as every day by 6 o'clock Eastern during the week. Miami will visit Tampa Bay. Tampa Bay coming off that narrow victory over the New England Patriots. Tom Brady's return back to New England. 10 for Tampa Bay, -10 and 48 for Miami. Miami still without Tua Tagovailoa. He will be out another week. Jacoby Brissett, the starting quarterback for Miami. They lost to Indianapolis over the weekend as a 2.5-point favorite. The Carolina Panthers, who got hammered by Dallas, made it close at the end. They're going to host the Philadelphia Eagles. Jalen Hurts has shown to be a very competent quarterback. Their defense has played better. Fletcher Cox still anchoring that defense for Philadelphia. They give Kansas City a tough time at home, but this is on the road. They're going to Carolina. Carolina 3.5, 45 the total. These are all 1 o'clock games unless noted. New Orleans Saints are favored by 2 at the Washington football team, 44.5. The Saints coming off that loss to the Giants over the weekend. They had a 21-10 lead, and they just kind of put it in the tank. Kamara had a pretty good game, and then the fourth quarter was all Giants. It was all Daniel Jones, Saquon Barkley. forced it into overtime with a field goal. Saquon Barkley wins it in overtime with a touchdown for the Giants, their first win of the year. So Saints and the football team, New Orleans Saints -244.5. The Tennessee Titans coming off that loss to the Jets. They're only a 4-point favorite going to Jacksonville. We already documented the Jacksonville problems with Coach Urban Meyer not going back on the team plan. The grainy video of him on the dance floor with a young woman there. 48.5 the total here. Tennessee -4, a little bit of a favorite, 115 there. Another 1 o'clock game, Detroit at Minnesota. NFC North game, a big one for Minnesota. They've lost 3 out of their first 4. The Lions have lost their first 4, so a big one as well for both of them. This could be big on the tiebreaker circuit for last place in the NFC North. The Vikings 8.5, 49.5 in that game. All right, another 1 o'clock game, Denver at Pittsburgh. Pittsburgh's lost 3 in a row, having a tough time protecting Ben Roethlisberger. Defense has given up points. Aaron Rodgers shredded the secondary last weekend. The Raiders beat them 3 weeks ago now, and they're 1-3, and things are not looking good for the Pittsburgh Steelers. There's still a lot of time to go. There's still 13 games left, but you got 3 teams above you that are 3-1. The Cincinnati Bengals, the Baltimore Ravens, and the Cleveland Browns are all 3-1. So the Steelers -1, 39.5. I think that's fair. I think Denver is good enough to not have a huge number next to them, and Pittsburgh -1 might be the key to winning that game as well too. All right, Green Bay at Cincinnati. Looking forward to this one. Green Bay offense versus that Cincinnati front 4. Their linebackers are really good. Defensively, they played really well. Joe Burrow has had a resurgence. There's no sign of him off his injury last year. Green Bay only a 3-point favorite, 51 on the road. Cincinnati, a little bit of a reputation pick, and so they're getting 3 at home. You got to think about Cincinnati in that game. I think they can win that game. The Patriots are 9 at Houston. Not a lot need to be said about Houston. The fact the Patriots did not do anything on offense. Mac Jones looks really good under center. They've limited the playbook to him, and he had just about as much as he could to try and upstage Tom Brady in his return back to New England. But 19-17 victory for New England. Houston gets blown out 40-0 by Buffalo. The total of this game is 39.5. The Cleveland Browns are going to go visit the Chargers. I love Justin Herbert. I think Justin Herbert might be the best quarterback in the NFL. The Chargers are only a 1-point favorite. He's going to have to deal. Speaking of Herbert, going to have to deal with Jadeveon Clowney and Myles Garrett. -1, 46.5 the total at home. Chargers 3-1. Browns also 3-1 in that game. Baker Mayfield playing well for the Browns. Chubb and Kareem Hunt running the ball well. And Baker finding the right receivers. Doesn't really have a lot of camaraderie with Beckham yet. And Jarvis Landry has been in and out of the lineup as well, too. The New York Giants will visit the Dallas Cowboys, one of the big games of the week on Sunday afternoon. Cowboys are 7-52. Giants coming off their win against New Orleans in the overtime by Saquon Barkley's touchdown. Cowboys built up a big lead. Carolina scored a couple of touchdowns late, made it close, actually had a chance to get the ball back again and keep it under the 5.5-point spread that Carolina was getting at Dallas last week. So Dallas and the New York Giants, NFC East clash. Dallas -7, 52. San Francisco will visit Arizona. Arizona 5.5-point favorite, 50 is the total. San Francisco coming off the loss to Seattle this last weekend. They're still very formidable defensively. They got to figure out how to catch Kyler Murray. He can move around a little bit, as everybody well knows, and he's got receivers this year, but the defense still to me a little AWOL. Got to pick it up a little bit in order for them to be able to continue their hot streak, the only undefeated team in the NFL. The San Francisco 49ers, not sure who they're going to start yet. Jimmy Garoppolo hurt himself right at halftime. He did not play the entire second half. Trey Lance came in and ran the entire playbook. And so we'll see if Kyle Shanahan's faith in Trey Lance is there yet for him to start. It could be. It looks like it might be, but I don't know for sure. And then Sunday Night Football, we talked about it. Buffalo is going to Kansas City. Kansas City, a 2.5-point favorite. The total 56.5. 56.5 for Kansas City. Wow. That's a lot of points. Chiefs 2-2 come back off the big victory at Philadelphia. And then Buffalo with their easy victory over Houston yesterday as well, too. 40-0. My fantasy football team, I have to throw that out as well, too. We'll preview the Monday game on Monday, but the Baltimore Ravens, the early line is they are favored by 7 and 46 over the Indianapolis Colts. The Colts got their first victory of the year over Miami this last weekend, as well as a 2.5-point, 3-point underdog, depending on where you got it. Okay, when we come back in 30 seconds, we will have the college outlook for you. Vasu Vaddiparty, your solo host. Charlie O on assignment. He'll be back with us next week as well, too. So we're here for you right now. The special Wednesday edition of the Friday Football Show for the Make the Money and Run podcast, sponsored by Britannia Arms of Cupertino, celebrating 40 years as Silicon Valley's best British pub and restaurant. BritanniaArmsDeanza.com, 408-252-7262. Take care, everybody. We'll be back in 30 seconds. Welcome back to the final segment of the Make the Money and Run podcast Friday Football Show, special Wednesday edition. Your solo host, Vasu Vaddiparty, Charlie O on assignment. Going to be up in Alaska with his wife. I hope he has a good time. I think that is an assignment if Charlie O's got to make sure his wife's happy. So we'll leave it at that for right now. I don't want to get into that. Do not want to make his wife unhappy with me. That's for darn sure. Very nice lady, Lindy is. So here 3 days a week, Monday, Thursday, and Friday. This again, special Wednesday edition of the Friday Football Show. We will not have shows tomorrow. Full shows tomorrow as we normally do on YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter live. You can download and subscribe if you missed any of the live broadcasts. We will have about a 15-minute segment every day through the baseball playoffs, the entire Major League Baseball playoffs, through the divisional series, the league championship series, and the World Series as well, too. The wild card game for the National League goes tonight. The Red Sox won last night. Don't forget we have NBA and NHL coming up over the next couple of weeks. We're here every Mondays, Thursdays, and Fridays, as we said, but don't forget our social media. We post our picks. We update the latest news. 6 o'clock Eastern, Monday through Fridays at Vparty Sports, Vparty Sports on Instagram, MTMAR Podcast on Twitter, and our email is mtmarpodcast@gmail.com, Facebook and Instagram, Twitter as well. You can leave us notes. You can go to our Make the Money and Run podcast Facebook page. You can go to the group segment. We have a Make the Money and Run podcast group page as well, too. So leave all your comments, leave all your notes. Tell us what you think about the NFL. The NCAA season. Who are your teams? What do you think about these weekend's games? If you like to wager on these games, you like to have a little action, whether it's actual wagers on games or prop bets or fantasy football, please let us know. We'll be more than happy to see what we can do to answer these questions, or drop us a line if you want to stay anonymous on the email address, mtmarpodcast@gmail.com. Britannia Arms are a good sponsor now. We've had them for the whole football season. Silicon Valley's longest serving British pub and restaurant, celebrating 40 years of the best food and drink. BritanniaArmsDeanza.com, 408-252-7262. Want to thank everybody on Facebook and YouTube and Twitter. They bring in some comments here. Frank O'Neill, oh yeah, salacious. Yeah, we went through that already. The Raiders are struck by lightning, assuming he means the bolts, and therefore the lightning bolts that are on the helmet. Yes, they were. They got outrun early. The game was long done, in my opinion. By the time the second half started, even though the Raiders did make it close, it looked like the Chargers were in complete control. I almost said San Diego. And then the Cleveland Guardians, that is Court Appointed. No, it's the baseball name. They're going to go with that bridge over there. If you've ever been to Ohio, if you've ever been to Cleveland, Frank, you'll see that bridge. Apparently, lore has it that there were Guardians guarding that bridge, so the enemy could not get across. So there's your little historical / geographical lesson as well. All right, let's go through the college football lines and the NFL lines we just gave you. Let's go through some of the key games in the college football lines. First of all, tomorrow night, Houston, Tulane, Temple, Cincinnati. Cincinnati, a 29-point favorite, 54.5. Arizona State, 12.5, 51.5. Michigan State, 5.5 and 50 at Rutgers. Ohio State, 21 and 71 versus Maryland. Moving down here, South Carolina, Tennessee, West Virginia, Baylor. Baylor favored by 3, 44.5. West Virginia coming off their loss last week. Baylor also coming off their loss last week to Oklahoma State. Florida, 38.5-point favorite over Vanderbilt. That's a tough one to go with. Oklahoma is a 3.5-point favorite in the Red River shootout that came being played in the Cotton Bowl in Dallas. Oklahoma, 3.5, 63.5. Lots of offense expected in that game. Arkansas, Mississippi. Interesting matchup there, Mississippi with Lane Kiffin and his antics last week. 6-point favorite, 67 the total. Wouldn't surprise me if that's a high-scoring game, as high as that is going right there. Let's see. North Carolina's had a pretty good run. They're 17.5-point favorites over Florida State. Boise State, BYU. Boise State, 6-point underdog, 57. Boy, have the mighty have fallen. Colorado State, 2.5-point favorite over my alma mater, San Jose State. The big one in the SEC, one of the big ones, Georgia, 15.5-point favorite, 46.5 at Auburn. That's going to be a tough one to come over as well, too. Illinois, 10.5-point underdog to Wisconsin. Wisconsin really struggling this year. Oregon State, Washington State in the Pac-12. The big one in Iowa City. Iowa, 2-point favorite, 40.5 to total. So they think Penn State's going to keep it close, maybe have a chance to win outright. The game 4 o'clock Eastern on Fox. But that is number 3 Iowa versus number 4 Penn State in Iowa City. -2, 40.5 for the Cyclones, for the Iowa Hawkeyes versus the Penn State Nittany Lions. All right, moving on down to games here. We've got TCU, who's ranked their 1.5-point favorite at Texas Tech. The total is 61. Kentucky still undefeated to this day after their upset win over Florida. LSU with a big come from behind loss. Auburn ended up beating them last week in the fourth quarter. Kentucky is a 3-point favorite. 50.5 is the over-under. Michigan at Nebraska. Nebraska has clearly improved themselves. 3.5-point favorite at Nebraska. 50.5 for Blue and Michigan. Michigan rolled over Wisconsin last weekend, 38-17. Jim Harbaugh's got the Wolverines playing well right now. We'll see what happens when they play Ohio State. That's still the big one as far as fans are concerned. But 3.5 over Nebraska and 50.5 seems to be a good play right there. Notre Dame, Virginia Tech. Notre Dame will pick 'em with Virginia Tech. 47 the total. USC hosting Utah. The tragic circumstances a few weeks ago. The transfer of Charlie Brewer. Charlie O and I did not get into that at all, but I just got a feeling that that's probably the best thing that happened was that. And he's a 5th-year transfer, so he should be allowed to transfer because you never know when that game's going to end. USC, a slight 3-point favorite, coming off their win over Colorado, 52.5. Alabama and Texas. Alabama, 18-point favorite at Texas A&M, 51.5. Texas A&M off the upset, off the loss to Mississippi State in the slight upset. Alabama with their win over Ole Miss surely made Nick Saban feel good about it going after his former pupil, Lane Kiffin. Memphis is a very underrated team. They're getting 3.5 to Tulsa, but they've lost 2 in a row. UCLA coming off their loss last week to Arizona State, in which they had a lead. They're a 16-point favorite at Arizona. The total is 61 for the game. Excuse me, UCLA -16. Chip Kelly's got to get that defense figured out. His offense seems to be working. Dorian Thompson, pretty good quarterback. They've got some good running backs there in Carbonette. Various other guys to run the ball. 16 a lot for Arizona. See, BYU had a big line against them too, and they failed to cover. Arizona, pretty good offense. See, 61 may be the way to go in that game. And then that's going to wrap it up for the college football segment and the lines. Very interesting weekend in college football. I want to see how everything goes there for that. All right. We are here every Mondays, Thursdays, and Fridays. Again, a special Make the Money and Run Friday football show, Wednesday edition. But ordinarily Mondays, Thursdays, and Fridays. Facebook, YouTube, Twitter live. If you miss any of the live broadcasts, you can download, subscribe anywhere you get your podcast. Check us out every day on social media by 6 o'clock Eastern, Vparty Sports, at Vparty Sports, at MTMAR Podcast. Send us an email, mtmarpodcast@gmail.com as well. Please pass it along, download, subscribe everywhere you get a chance. Any podcasting outlet you have. Check out the Britannia Arms of Cupertino, Silicon Valley's longest-serving British pub and restaurant, celebrating 40 years of the best food and drink. Britannia Arms, Deanza.com, 408-252-7262. All right. I'm Vasu, Vaddiparty, your solo host for the Make the Money and Run Friday football show, the special Wednesday edition. Don't forget, baseball previews every day, all the way through the World Series, starting tomorrow. No full show on Thursday and Friday, and we'll be back to semi-normal next week. We'll let you know on the social media pages. Let us know what you've got going on as well, too, for this weekend. Have a great afternoon. Enjoy the games. Good luck, and we will see you tomorrow around 3 o'clock for the baseball preview show. I'm Vasu Vaddiparty. This is the Make the Money and Run podcast Friday football show. Have a great afternoon, everybody.